Well, welcome back to our 40 Days with Jesus series. Today we look to Luke's Gospel in chapter 16, where we find the parable of the Rich Man and Lazarus. And I want to begin today by repeating somewhat of what I said last time I spoke with you about parables and what we learned about them. We studied the parable of the Good Samaritan, and I told you that it was back in my childhood days at Peachcrest Christian Church that I first heard and learned the popular definition of that word parable. I learned that it was a definition that I would incorporate as I was a student the rest of my life, and also now as a teacher for many years as well. Again, and I told you that I listened in rapture back in those early days as the Parables from Nature film strips gave us this wonderful and beautiful definition that a parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And those delightful film strips then just told us a little bit more about what parables are, saying that they're a simple story used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson as told by Jesus in the Gospels. Again, I hope maybe some of you saw them as well, and that brings back pleasant memories for you. But I want to again just spend another moment or two clarifying what a parable is by looking at the word itself. Our English word parable is a transliteration, which simply means that the letters in the Greek word have been translated into English letters for their counterparts. And so our word parable is a transliteration of the Greek word parabole. This is a compound Greek word which means to lay alongside of for the purpose of comparison or understanding. Parables are a wonderful educational and inspirational tool for the purpose of comparison and explanation for our fuller understanding. Jesus was a true master when it came to using this powerful and thought-provoking teaching method called parables. In his parables, Jesus used everyday things, everyday people, everyday situations that the common man could relate to and connect with. Like no one before or even since him, Jesus laid out these ordinary, everyday elements, and he put things alongside truths and principles that made them for godly and biblical application, for our ears to hear, and for our hearts and minds to understand and our hands to practice. Parables are a worthy subject of our obedient study and meditation. As I mentioned, today we're going to consider the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. What could be more common and universal in any society than the presence of rich men and the presence of beggars? And together these two men teach us much of great importance and significance about life on earth and about life ever after. Now we include this teaching among the parables that Jesus gave us, although it's never called a parable in the Bible text. But it does fit that definition that we've given, and it's also contained in a large section of Scripture filled with parable after parable. And so I think it's safe for us to refer to this as a parable. Theologians pretty well agree that the purpose of a parable is to assert or affirm one primary truth. And because of this, not every detail of a parable is meant to be the foundation of a Christian doctrine or a tenet of faith. So we should be careful not to assign every detail of a parable a specific spiritual meaning or explanation. Some of the details in the parables are just there as part of the story. They may be included for greater interest or better understanding of the story overall. As we look at this parable, I want us to consider 5 words. Those 5 words are life, time, death, eternity, and place. Word number 1 is life. And I want to make 2 statements or 2 explanations about each of those words from thinking about this parable. You see, life may go or might not go as we would hope it would. Now, our lot or our situation in this life is shaped by many things and circumstances. Some people are rich, some are poor, some are healthy, some are ill, some live long years, some do not. If we turn to Ecclesiastes 3, we see that it teaches that every life contains a series of mixed happenings and events, good and bad, happy and sad. Yep, life is a variety of experiences, some pleasant, some painful, some that we might really crave and want, and others we'd rather have nothing to do with. Jesus did tell us that the poor would always be among us. And he also recognized that rich men were a reality when he stated that it was hard for them to enter the kingdom. Yes, our lot in life is uncertain. It is changeable, and it is lived with no guarantees. And we would be wise to look at both these men and see how each dealt with the given circumstances of his life and the choices he made. Statement 2 about life. Life choices determine our eternal destiny. This is not a story about earning heaven by our good works. Such teaching about works-based salvation is anti-biblical. Lazarus, the beggar, was not ushered to heaven because of the good things he had done. Rather, he gets to heaven because of the condition of his heart and his relationship with God. And although life presented him some very rough challenges, instead he chose to rely on God and his friends to put him in places where his needs could be met. This is faith in action. Nor is this a story about being sent to hell because of wealth. Money is only a tool. It is not good or evil in itself. The real issue about wealth is how we use it and how and if it controls us or we use it to serve God and bless others. The rich man is in hell because he loved and worshiped money, and he was unwilling to share it or remove it from the throne of his life. Wealth was his god, and the Bible commands that we have no other god before Jehovah. The point here is that while we live on this earth, we enjoy a free will. This means we have opportunity to make good, wise, and godly choices, or not, in all manner of things. And our choices in life determine our final dwelling place. My encouragement to you is obvious. Choose carefully, choose wisely, choose faithfully. Word number 2 is time. And the first statement I want to make about time is this: time on this earth is our chance to do and make things right. Both men in the story had their choice about where and how they spent their earthly years. The primary issue for both men was the matter of faith in God and service in His kingdom, not their wealth, not their circumstances. Now, the choices they made regarding those circumstances were polar opposites. The rich man obviously loved his money, and he selfishly hoarded it for himself. The beggar Lazarus made a far better choice: to know and worship God. The second statement about time is this: time in eternity is where we reap what we sow. This is the reality of God's final judgment. What we did or what we didn't do, how we lived, who or what we loved and worshiped, what priorities controlled our lives. These are the questions, these are the standards that we must give an answer for, and we all will. And our eternal dwelling place is based upon our conduct and our values, and of course, the grace and the mercy of God. We will be tormented or we will be rewarded based upon those criteria. Word number 3 is death. Statement 1 about death is it is the common fate of all mankind. The book of Hebrews tells us that it is appointed unto men once to die, to all men once to die, and then the judgment. Since the beginning of Adam and Eve's sin's presence has been creating havoc in this world, including the stark reality of death, that all life comes to an end. Death is the universal and inescapable appointment of every man, woman, and child. Death statement number 2. Death ushers us into eternity. You see, at death, the spirit departs from the body to go to its final home. Now, the word eternal doesn't mean really forever. It means without time. There's a distinction between the two. Time is an earthly measurement. And the Bible even tells us that with a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years. Earthly time comes to an end when we die. Now, I know it's hard for us to understand the absence of time in eternity because we live with time on this earth. It's hard for us to comprehend or imagine, but that's the truth. Death ushers us into eternity, and that means we live outside of time. Statement number 2 about eternity: it is a forever thing. That may sound a little contradictory, but what I mean there is that it never stops. We may not have time to measure it, but it keeps on going and going and going. Now, through the centuries, there have been many doctrines created by man about temporary or short-term placements in the afterlife. In other words, you go somewhere for a while and then something happens and you can change. The Bible teaches no such possibility about changing one's eternal residence once you arrive. You can change it while you're on earth, but you can't change it once you get there. Any such teaching about a second chance or another go at it needs to be ignored and rejected. Word number 4, eternity. Eternity is a forever thing. Second word I want to say about eternity is that it will be spent permanently in either one or two places. There are no other options. It's one or the other. And this parable of the rich man and Lazarus teaches us that there's no passing between the two. Where you go is where you stay. So again, I say, when you think about your eternity and what you need to do to get where you want to go, choose wisely and carefully. Word number 5 is place. The place where we spend eternity. Now, one of those places is terrible. It's awful. It's just something we never want to be a part of. This is the place where the rich man is spending his eternity. Now, to try to tell us a little bit about this place, the Bible writers use the worst and the most horrific words and images they can to describe this terrible place. But even in that, their words, inspired by God as they are, still fall short of its real agony and torment. It is an awful place. It is a place we want to avoid, and we can through Jesus Christ. Word number 2 about place is this: just the opposite. One of those places is wonderful. 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 This is where the beggar Lazarus is spending his eternity. In a like fashion, while they use those horrible words to describe hell, Bible writers use the best and the most pleasant and beautiful words and image to describe this wonderful place called heaven. And still their words fall short of its beauty and its glory and its splendor. Oh, they try, and they paint a beautiful picture of a place we desire and want to be in forever. But they still fall short, because heaven will be far more wonderful than we can even imagine. Oh, I remember in junior church, in my formative years, singing that chorus that goes like this: Heaven is a wonderful place. It's filled with glory and grace. I want to see my Savior's face. Heaven is a wonderful place. 5 words that this parable gives us. Now let me spend one more word in conclusion as we wrap up this parable from Luke, and that is this. When the rich man in hell requests of Abraham for a messenger to come and warn his family, Abraham's reply to that request is an exciting and inspiring truth for all of God's messengers, to tell us that every messenger of God is worthy of our attention. Messengers of God are worthy of our attention. Please hear that carefully. And I want that to be encouragement to each and every one of us. God can and God does use any willing vessel to share His word and His love. And that definitely includes me and you. So I want us to be thankful to Him for that opportunity. And I want us to be faithful to that calling to proclaim His ways to a world in desperate need for them. There's much more we could learn from this parable, but I'll close from there, just reminding you that, as is the case usually in these studies, there's a list of questions that follow, and I encourage you to spend some time with them to help you better understand the text and learn even more from this marvelous story Jesus told about 2 men who, by their choices, ended up in different eternities. God bless you. Keep looking forward to seeing you on Sundays, and those watching online, have a good day.